Rob van Rooyen is Head of Strategy at the House of Brave agency and joins us now with a view on the role of design in neuromarketing. Rob, welcome. I'm a little out of my depth here, so we're going to start the conversation with you reminding us what neuromarketing is, where it fits in, and perhaps most importantly, why brands need to take some cognizance of this.
Absolutely, Jeremy. I think neuroscience has been around for some time. Neuromarketing is still relatively new in terms of a science that we apply. It really is the measurement of how we measure the brain's effect on stimuli that we provide to it. So we know that 90% of all communication is non-conscious. It really is to help us understand what that non-conscious conversation is going, and that is by measuring the brain activity and measuring this electrical world that happens below the surface.
So I see one brand, something lights up more than if I see another brand that doesn't have the same impact on the cortex.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think it is not just about the brand, it's about the stimuli that's been provided. So neuromarketing can't help us with what to say, but it can certainly help us measure in terms of what is more effective and what works better. So a puppy versus a child, we can actually now measure what would be more favorable to a person in a piece of communication. And we're seeing leaps and bounds. It is a very fast-growing science.
Come on, Rob, doesn't it depend on how ugly the puppy is and how cute the child is?
Absolutely. Yeah. Millward Brown would tell you that they put them together makes it very effective.
Jokes aside though,
I think that neuromarketing being applied to how we are going about creating communication is really changing everything we do, from emailers to billboards to television ads. We currently have a campaign running for One Life that used a lot of neuromarketing to help increase its likability. And you can see it. It speaks in the research. I hate to say it. It is a science.
So is it in the visuality? In other words, the pictures, or is it simply in the color choice that you use? Does it more impactful on the palette, for instance?
I think that what we've actually started to learn is that they all play a role. And it's actually, we have to decipher some of that information. Sometimes it is about the imagery. So some neuromarketers, and again, be very careful because this word is being used as a buzzword. So it is a bit of a voodoo science, and people can misapply it. And they'll tell you that you have to use human eyes at a certain percentage in an image to get an emotional response. The reality is that needs to be applied with some of the other things that we're knowing. So a lot of the time, neuromarketing should be tempered with consumer behavior.
So how often is there a correlation between consumer behavior and that visual eye and plugging people into the
I think
the system?
Where they start to come together is there are three disciplines that are melding together. Persuasion science, selling, consumer behavior, understanding my needs, insight, segmentation, and then neuro is understanding the messaging and how I can make a more impactful message to the audience. And if I can layer those three things together, hopefully what we can do is create communication that sells more products. And the research is out. It does.
At what point does a brand need to start thinking about this in terms of its own repositioning, in terms of its own development? Is this right at the front of the process?
I think that there's two parts to it. As I said to you, if you're layering in the three disciplines, absolutely a brand creation. But it is more important to look at the neuroscience in terms of when we create communication. So neuroscience helps us guide in terms of what is more effective in terms of how I get my message across. It's not necessarily going to go one brand versus another brand. What you will be able to test is some of the visualizations of that brand, logos, colors, presenting the ecosystem. That's where neuroscience helps us get a better understanding of what is more favorable to the visual cortex, which, as we know, anything between 60 and 70% of all information comes in through the eye.
How does this work in a multicultural society like ours?
Well, we actually have a lot of problems with it. And it actually goes to the science of things. The machinery that we use and the companies we use, they use not only machines that measure the brain activity and things, but they also look at things like your irises and how they respond to it. Unfortunately, because of the African market having brown and black, it's very hard for the actual science to be able to measure the dilation. And so there is some challenges to it. We are, as I said, a very new science. So every day they are trying to solve these types of issues.
What are the risks for a brand?
There's none. In fact, I think that if I could, we're a little bit behind in terms of how some of the other countries are applying, especially around Asia. certainly around South America, that they're starting to realize the power of it. But you are seeing some local brands that are embracing it and starting to bring it in. Yum, KFC, that they started a project a few years back under David. And they are brands that are starting to understand that the power of creating effective communication doesn't just lie in what is the message, how do I say it, and who am I saying it to?
I've been talking to you for 5 minutes, Rob van Rooyen. Why are your eyes dilated?
I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm
to be
excited.
here, as always. Rob van Rooyen, Head of Strategy at the House of Brave Agency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.